Now I'm on to part 2, and notice down here at the bottom at the tabs I've added a 4th tab, right? You know, there were my 9 observations and so forth. I've got 9 sampling discs, I decided to call it. Again, you can call it what you like, but I would call it something different than sheet 4. That way you can find your work when you need to go find it and work with it. Always good to name things something reasonable. Now in this, we're going to do our trials down the rows. We're going to do kind of the opposite of what we had in the first part, because we're going to have so many trials. And excuse me. So, you know, I can go in here and I need to label, and so this is going to be my trial number. Now, what I'm mostly interested in is the average or the mean, and so, you know, I could say average up here, I could say sample mean, I could just say mean. In this video there, I made that a little wider so it fit a little better, so sample mean. And then I need my observations, and in this first part, I'll call it O1 for observation 1. That way I remember what it is. And now, again, in my spreadsheet, if I do some kind of word or letter followed by a 1, or a 10, it doesn't matter. When I drag this bottom right thing to the right, it automatically redoes the numbers, so that's very nice. And let's see, so there are my observations. It would probably be nice to center everything so I can see it a little better in its cell, and so I center all that. And then here, you know, for my trial, I'm going to do 1, 2. Now, I don't want to type that all the way down. That'll take too long. So I'm going to highlight the 1 and the 2, because again, in my spreadsheet, I think if I just did the 2, I don't know. We'll see. I don't know what it. Oh, okay. Mine says 3, 4, so that's good. Some spreadsheets, if I type that 1 and then the 2 and then started bringing it down, it might just do all 2s. I've seen that happen with some spreadsheets. And just so we can see here, if I just start with a 1, remember up here I just had the 1 and it automatically went with 2, 3, 4. I'm not sure what it's going to do. Oh, okay, so mine in this case is going up the way I would like. I don't think it always does that. Again, if you know, by highlighting the 1 and the 2, definitely most spreadsheets will then understand I want to go 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and so forth. So now I'm going to have to pull this way down to about row 1000. So I just let it go and go and go. And that was a little too far, so I go back up, and let's see, there's 1000. Okay, so there I know, you know, when I've gotten to the bottom of my trials, I want to do 1000 trials of 5 observations. Now here, I'm just going to ask for the average of, so I usually say of when I do an open parenthesis, because that's math stuff like f of x, right? You write f open parenthesis, x close parenthesis, f of x. And so I often will say of when I do an open parenthesis. Yeah, you can think that's weird, that's fine. And so average, and I want those 5 cells. I want to take the average of those, C2 through G2, close that, and it says divide by 0. Yeah, I don't have anything in here, so it doesn't know how to take the average. It's saying I have 0 things, right? And you add the 5 things up, divide by how many there are, but there are 0. So it's saying I divided by 0. That's fine, it'll work in a minute. Now, I have a choice. I could pull all this down, and again, you can do it by dragging down like this. All right, you know, that fills it in. I drag it back up, it disappears. I could do a copy, and I could highlight a bunch of stuff and paste, and I could put it in that way. I'm just showing different ways I can fill this in. The best, I think, is in a case like this where I have to go down 1,000. If I just get right over that bottom right and I double click on that, it fills it all in all the way down to 1,000. Oops. See, it goes till the numbers stop on the left. Now, if there had been a gap, like at 14 here, it would have only gone down to 13 and stopped. So, you know, if you have a gap, you have to fill in more and all that. And now here, I just want my random numbers between 1 and 9, so equals rand between 1 comma 9. Got that. And now the average is 2, and here I can drag this over, and I've got my 5 random numbers. And then here I have you know, those 5 random numbers. That's all highlighted. Now, you know, again, that magic, I can come over here to the bottom right of that, what I've highlighted there, double click, and it fills it all in, and now I have numbers all the way down. Now, what we want to do with this is we want to look at this sampling distribution of sample means, and so notice here all of a sudden, before we could only, you know, we were only looking at numbers like 2, 9, 4, 8, and so forth when we made our bar charts. But now, you know, I've got 4.8, 5.8, 6.2, 6.6, and so forth. And so what we'd like to do in this case is actually make a histogram. Now, the frequency part of that is no different. You know, I'm going to go here and add my bins. Now, so I need my bins. But now, in this case, what I'd like to do is, you know, thinking about the numbers, I would like to make bins that are centered on integers, like 1, 2, 3, 4, and so forth. And so when I do that, I need to count. I need to be careful about how I count. And so what I'm going to do is my first bin is actually going to be 1.5. Okay, well, why 1.5? Well, because I want to take any averages, any means that are 1.5 or lower, and put those in the first bin that I will center at 1. And then 2.5 for the next one. So now the next bin, I'm between 2.5 and 1.5. Well, that will center at 2. Okay, so now, and what's nice again is I can pull this down. Probably again, I kind of like to, well, I'm not going to center that whole thing. So center this, and there we have our bins, 1.5 through 9.5. Now again, the 9.5, I could call it a 9, it doesn't really matter, because what's going to go here is, in this spot, is everything bigger than 8.5, which will, be, could be, 8.7 or 8.8 or something like that. Now, it can never be bigger than 9, because that's the biggest number I have here. So do I leave it as 9.5? Do I change it to 9? Again, it doesn't really matter. So now here, I do my frequency. Whoops, not there yet. Here I want to say frequency. And, okay, and remember now I highlight all of those. I say equals. Okay, and the frequency command. Open parenthesis, and I need my data. Now my data are the sample means. Now here's another nice trick. Okay, so I need to highlight this, all the way down. That's a long way down, right? And I can do that, and it will fill in. However, since I actually know that this stops at row 1001, what I could do is I can do a combination of filling in and typing. So I fill in to row 10. Now the reason I do that, mine's not going to show up here for the moment, so I'll go up to the top here. The reason I do that is, and that's kind of small on your screen, probably in the video, you can make it bigger, but it says B10 right now. I'm going to add a 0, and now you can see it out here, 1, and then I'll click back out here. But you see, I went down to B10, and then I added the 0 and the 1. And so I'm kind of doing a combination of highlighting and typing, because I could have typed in the B2 colon B1001. But again, I kind of like to click on things as much as possible, because then I can visually see I'm in the right place. But I'm quite sure about that 1001, so I just went down to row 10 and then added the 0 and 1, comma, and then my bins or classes. And remember, you only go to the next to the last one. And then my parenthesis. And so there I have it. And again, this is an array formula, so I highlighted that whole thing. I hold down the Control and Shift key, I hit enter, and there we get our frequency. And again, let's probably be nice to center that so I can see it a little better. And now what I'd like to do is create a histogram. So see, this time, because I'm talking about filling in numbers between integers and so forth, I want a histogram, not a bar chart. Now the way I'll do that is, in my case, let's see, I will probably highlight all that, including the frequency. I don't really need to highlight the frequency. But why not? And insert a chart, and it's just a bar chart again, or a column chart in this spreadsheet is what they call it. And I'll just go ahead and say finish. So it's it's just this column chart or bar chart, and they don't match up, right? Well, so now what I need to do is see if I can fix that. And in Excel and in OpenOffice, yeah, you can do that. And notice I have some different icons up here. Again, I tend to just right click. And I believe what I want to do is format my data series. You know, every spreadsheet's a little bit different, so you have to kind of look around for it. And notice here, plot options, leave gap. I'm going to say assume 0. And, oh wait, missing values. Yeah, just leave gap is fine, I think. That's not the gap I was looking for. Let's see, so here's overlap, there's spacing, show bars side by side. Now I'm also going to look at area, you know, and the reason I'm doing this is partly because I never remember, you know, and so I could have looked this up before I did the video, but the point is, this is what you need to do. You need to go in and look around for things. You can go to Google and ask for help, that kind of thing. But here, overlap, 0%, show bars side to side. So I'm going to just try a couple things. So I'm going to say show bars side by side. Let's see what happens. Nothing. Okay, so nothing happened there. So I'm going to go back to that, and I'm going to, here spacing 100%, I'm going to take that down to 0. 0%. I'm going to try that and get rid of that because I'm not sure what it was doing and it didn't seem to do anything, and I say okay, and look at that. So I put my again, looking at that dialogue, right? I went to spacing and I said, well, I don't want any spacing. And that was just under some options of formatting the data series. All spreadsheets have some things like that. Now, again, I believe in Google Sheets, I have never found a way to get them to touch. Or it might be the opposite. I've never found a way to get them to not touch. You know, one of those two. And but Google Sheets is a little more limited than most spreadsheets. So here, you know, I just found the spacing, take it down to 0, said okay, and there we go. What a beautiful histogram. And now what we notice, right, in this case, as we're looking at the sample means, that instead of the sample, remember the sample, if I go back here for these 9 observations, and I think if I pull over here, I've still got plots around here. Yeah, so here are my different trials, right? These things, you know, they aren't peaked in the middle. They're just sort of kind of all over the place. If I go to 45, it's starting to look a little better, right? They look pretty, well, somewhat flat across the top. Not great, but they're getting flatter across the top. And notice they fill in all the way from 1 to 9. Every single one of these fills in from 1 to 9. But when I start looking at my sampling distribution, which is the frequency of the sample means for 5 observations, what I see is it doesn't seem to fill in at 1 or 9. Now those are possible, they're just not very likely, whereas things around 5 are very, very likely. And notice it looks reasonably symmetric here. This side looks a little bit taller than this side, but you know, on the whole, it's reasonably symmetric. And some of what may have made it a little bit taller on the right is our bins. So remember, you know, for bins, I stop at 1.5. Now, so if I had put 1.49, would that have done anything different? Actually, I don't think so with these numbers, because they can only be at, you know, 0.24, 6, and 8, or dead even at a number like 7. So, but what you see is a very different shaped distribution in our frequency plot, our histogram here, from part 1. Okay, instead of being flat across, it is definitely peaked in the middle. That's what we tend to call a bell-shaped curve. And sample means when we look at their distribution for a number of observations, this is the kind of thing we'll see. And again, notice that all of a sudden, well, 1s and 9s not really going to happen, and 5s are going to happen the most. So out of our 1,000 runs, about 350 of them, it looks like, were in that right around 5, between 4.5 and 5.5. And I could check that just by moving this over a little bit. 349, so not quite 350. Okay, and I think that will do it for this video. This is kind of what we're doing as far as our tasks here, and I'll probably do another video again showing how to fill in the middle of our data to make our job easier when we start going to more observations. Okay, so we'll call that one good.